The term data is thrown around often. It usually refers to large sets of scientific measurements, and what's usually emphasized is its role in the acquisition of knowledge. However, since there are very few efforts from the scientific community to communicate the meaning behind the data, that knowledge base is often quite insular. Much of the understanding is seen as too complicated to convey, and as such, very few people are able to understand what the data truly show. The issue with data is that despite its direct connection to the world, it often does not feel as though it's real. It is difficult for our minds to conceptualize the true meaning of numbers on a page. In fact, it's difficult even to simply try to visualize most numbers past a certain point. Think of how we all understand that 1 million and 1 billion are very large numbers, but their scale feels impossible to visualize. We would also hope to be able to see that 1 billion is 1,000 times larger than 1 million, but it's far too difficult to even visualize what it would mean to scale something by 1,000. The human brain is somewhat able to understand things in terms of scales and proportions. We can understand something being twice as big or 4 times as big, but as soon as the proportions are impossible for us to visualize, we face the same problem. Some artists have worked to solve this problem and bring us all to a world where we can more fully grasp the meaning of data. These artists understand that there is more to communication than graphs and words. Human understanding is a complex web of interconnected logical understandings, each weighted by their emotional significance. By utilizing the emotional powers of art, data rises from its cold, precise nature to something that is instead unapologetically human. Natalie Mibach is an artist whose work has done just that. For much of her life, Mibach was interested in the weather and all of the data that we collect about it. To create her art, she collects her own data about the weather and compiles it with data that is available on the internet. In some of her work, she has taken data about wind, temperature, and air pressure and combined them all to create. These structures are massive, vibrant, and exceedingly tactile. Natalie works primarily with basket weaving. She says the rigid yet flexible material allows for the complex and continuous nature of weather patterns to present as they truly are, as geometric wonders. At this point, you have likely noticed that Mibach's work appears almost playful, as if it is asking to be approached. She says that this is intentional. Her work of interacting with weather data has familiarized her with the ways that the climate is changing and the weather is worsening. She wants her work to draw in the viewer such that their guard is down once they realize what they're truly looking at. Let us look for a second time at this piece, titled Ian and Nicole. We begin to see that Mibach's work is not just inspired by the numbers and by the data. The numbers themselves live within her structures. This work, specifically, is an amalgamation of data from Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole. In fact, all three of these pieces are compilations of data from hurricanes. Natalie wants us to see precisely how this data directly affects human lives. She wants us to feel for the people affected and to see how the intensity of these storms seems only to be worsening. Her works are important because they are able to help us internalize, understand, and care about the ways that our world is changing around us. She is able to convey not only the data proving climate change, but the devastating impacts that our fellow man is experiencing. Lori Frick is another artist who feels a deep reverence for data. Interestingly, she comes from an engineering background rather than an art one. Unlike Mibach, she seems somewhat less transparent with the numbers in her work. She creates works of art first and foremost, using the data as direct inspiration. Her work began when she became curious about her sleep. She recorded data as she and her husband slept, and then processed this data using a computer. She made the data she found into works of art. In these pieces, she often color-coded her mood during the day, so that she came to understand how sleep affected her mood. Frick stated in an interview with Huffington Post that an understanding of the sleep data has led her to respect sleep more, and feel less embarrassed to, for example, leave a social gathering to ensure she got enough sleep. While some of Frick's work does have a lighter tone than that of Mibach, she has felt obligated to point our collective attention at important issues using her artwork. During the COVID-19 pandemic, food insecurity rates for children doubled. In order to spread awareness, Lori worked on a piece made from thick, colorful pieces of glass titled Childhood Hunger. The piece shows the disparity in rates of different afflictions that occur when a child becomes food insecure. Some of these afflictions include obesity, illnesses, and antisocial behavior. We can see that food-insecure children are at much higher risk from many of these ailments. The use of an everyday material like glass helps the viewer to relate the data to something tactile. It feels like we could reach out and touch it, and that makes it much more real. Through observing the works of both Natalie Miebach and Laurie Frick, it is clear that art can be an effective tool for disseminating information and increasing understanding of serious issues. However, not all art must have some greater purpose or message. The art that these two make is beautiful, and sometimes it's important to let the pieces speak for themselves. Let the beauty embedded in the data reveal itself.